The last thing Mrs. Gable said to me after 11 years was "that's everything." 2 words for 2 garbage bags, and a girl she had used like a piece of furniture she was finally throwing out. And by the time I reached the limousine at the curb, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the door. Inside sat a man the streets of Seoul called the Devil, a man who had reportedly burned an entire crime empire to the ground without blinking. And he looked at me across that dark leather cabin with eyes so heavy it felt like he was carrying something ancient behind them. And then I flinched, and he stopped moving completely, and what crossed his face in that half-second wasn't cruelty or impatience or the cold satisfaction I had braced for. It was pain. The specific private pain of someone watching something they love get hurt. And I didn't understand it yet. I couldn't. Because I didn't yet know that the jagged scar on his left hand was the one I had wrapped in a torn strip of my shirt on a playground 15 years ago while he bled, and I told him, "I've got you." Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is reaching. The $50,000 took Mrs. Gable 4 minutes and 30 seconds to count. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Henrietta knew because she was watching the clock on the kitchen wall. The one with the cracked face and the stuttering second hand, because looking anywhere else in that room felt like drowning. The briefcase made her stomach turn. The man in the black suit made her breath go thin. And Mrs. Gable, the focused, business-like satisfaction on her face as she licked her thumb and moved through each stack, made something deep inside Henrietta go quiet in a way she recognized. The way things go quiet right before they break. "That's 48, 49. Mrs. Gable paused, licked her thumb. "Shh, 50. She snapped the last stack flat against the table like punctuation. Done, settled, over. She did not look up. The man in the black suit slid a document across the scarred linoleum. His movements were exact, economical. The movements of someone who had never wasted a single gesture in his life. Mrs. Gable read it the way you skim a grocery receipt. She found the bottom line, scratched her name in a loose and practiced hand, and pushed it back. "She's no trouble," she said, already reaching for the briefcase, already thinking about something else. "Does what she's told. Quiet. She talked about me the way you talk about a used appliance you're finally getting rid of." The man in the suit turned and looked at Henrietta for the first time. His eyes were dark, not cruel, not empty, but heavy, like a man carrying something enormous and old behind them. He did not look at her the way Mrs. Gable did. He looked at her the way you look at something you have spent a very long time searching for. Henrietta didn't notice. She was staring at her shoes. "She may take her belongings," the man said. Not to Henrietta, to Mrs. Gable, like checking an inventory item. "She's got a bag by the door," Mrs. Gable replied, clicking the briefcase shut. "That's everything." That was the goodbye. 2 words. 11 years. That's everything. No thank you for the floors she'd mopped since she was 13. No acknowledgement that a human person was leaving this building. Just the sound of a television turning up louder in the next room, Mrs. Gable's biological children, the real children, laughing at something she was never allowed to sit in front of, drowning out the sound of a girl being traded for $50,000 and a cleared casino ledger. Henrietta picked up her trash bag from beside the door. She had packed it in 20 minutes. Most of what she owned fit in the backpack already. Nursing textbooks, a phone charger, the toiletry bag. She'd bought herself with tutoring money she'd earned behind Mrs. Gable's back. The rest was fabric. 2 pairs of jeans, a hoodie, second-hand sneakers with a crease across the left toe. At the bottom of the bag, wrapped carefully inside a t-shirt, was the bracelet. Elastic and colored beads. Pink and yellow. She'd made it at 9 years old in a classroom that smelled of crayons and radiator heat. Before the system, before the Fosters, before she learned to stop expecting to be loved. She kept it because it was the last thing in the world that had ever truly belonged to her. She stood at the front door and let herself look back. Once. Half a second. The kitchen. The narrow staircase. The indifferent, breathing house. She stepped out into the rain. She thought she knew what she was walking into. A monster. A weapon aimed at her. She had no idea she was walking toward the only person who had never stopped looking for her. The limousine sat at the curb like it owned the block. Black and long and so clean, the rain slid off its surface like the car had already decided it was untouchable. The driver opened the rear door and said nothing. Henrietta stood on the wet sidewalk with her trash bag, her backpack, her 11 years, and her elastic bracelet, and she thought very clearly, I am going to die in that car. She got in. The door sealed behind her with a soft, pressurized click. The rain vanished. The cracked street, the peeling paint, Mrs. Gable's kitchen light still burning yellow in the window. All of it disappeared behind tinted glass. The interior smelled of cedarwood and something warm she didn't have a name for. The leather was the color of deep water. There were no handles on the inside of the door. She noticed that. She forced herself to keep breathing anyway. He was sitting across from her. She had expected something monstrous. The whispered accounts she'd overheard at Mrs. Gable's kitchen table over the years. The devil of soul. The man who leveled an entire rival organization and left not a single witness. The man whose name made casino debt collectors lower their voices. Those stories had built something enormous in her imagination. He did not look like a story. He looked like a man who had decided, a very long time ago, to become something that could not be broken. Completely, unnervingly still. Not the stillness of peace, but of control. A hurricane that had chosen for now not to move. Black suit, perfectly fitted. Silver watch catching the cabin light. On his right hand, a single obsidian ring. His hair swept back. Precise. His face sharp-featured and severe, built for function, not warmth. And there, cutting diagonally through his left eyebrow. A scar. Pale. Old. Jagged in the way scars are when the wound happened fast. In chaos. With no care for neatness. His eyes found hers the moment she sat down. And they did not let go. She looked away immediately. Her hands were shaking badly. Enough that she could feel the tremor in her teeth. Don't meet eyes. Don't take up space. Don't give anyone a reason. She heard him shift. The quiet sound of fabric. Movement. She flinched. Shoulders up, head down, whole body bracing the way it had braced 1,000 times in that house when someone moved too fast in her direction. The movement stopped. She waited. Nothing came. Carefully, she looked up. His expression had changed. Something had moved across his face, deep, private, gone almost before she could catch it, and left behind something that looked almost unbearably like grief. He reached into his breast pocket, slowly, deliberately, as if he understood that she needed him to move that way. He held out a white silk handkerchief. Not a threat, not a command. Just a handkerchief. You're cold, he said. His voice was low and quiet, the kind that didn't need volume to fill a room. She stared at the handkerchief, then at him. Why are you being kind to me? She whispered. His jaw tightened. A muscle moved at his temple. Because someone should have been, he said. A long time ago. She didn't understand what he meant yet. She would. The limousine moved. Henrietta held the handkerchief between both palms and focused on the warmth still lingering in the silk from his pocket, and tried very hard not to fall apart. 3 days ago, she was crouching on a kitchen floor at midnight, exhausted, invisible. Now she was standing in a building that had more security than some governments. Nothing about this made sense. But then again, neither did he. The estate rose behind iron gates that parted without a sound. At the end of a private drive stood a building that looked less like a home and more like something that had decided to become permanent. Glass and dark stone. floor-to-ceiling windows lit from within. Guards posted at intervals so still they looked architectural. She was led inside by a woman named Ji Yan who moved through the corridors with the efficiency of someone whose job was to make transitions seamless. Marble floors, high ceilings, art on the walls that Henrietta suspected cost more than the Foster house, and everything inside it. Her room was on the upper floor, larger than any space she had ever been given. The bed alone was wider than the entire room she'd had at Mrs. Gable's. Ji-yeon left. The door was not locked. Henrietta stood in the center of the room with her trash bag at her feet. And then she saw it. A scuff mark on the floor near the window. Old reflex. 11 years of it. See a mess. Fix it before someone blames you. She crossed to the bathroom, took a folded hand towel from the rack, came back, and crouched to wipe it clean. She was already scrubbing when the door pushed open. Yejun stood in the doorway, jacket removed, sleeves of his black dress shirt rolled to the elbow, and she saw, for the first time, the ink covering his forearms. Dark, intricate, moving, when the muscles beneath them shifted. He looked at her crouching on the floor with a hand towel. Something happened to his face. Not quite anger, sharper than anger, and quieter. The way a wound is quieter than the thing that caused it. "What are you doing?" he said. Not a question. "There's a mark. I was just..." Stand up. Flat. Final. Absolute. The voice of a man who had never said anything twice. She stood. He walked into the room and stopped a few feet from her, looked at the towel, then at her. "You are not here to clean floors," he said. "I know, it's a habit, It is not a habit." His voice dropped, quieter now, which somehow made it heavier. "It is what they made you." The sentence landed like a stone into still water. He reached out and took the hand towel from her, gently, and set it on the dresser. "You are a guest in this house. You will never clean another floor. You will never carry another person's weight on your back. You will not apologize for existing in a room." He paused. "Do you understand me?" She nodded because her throat had closed. He held her gaze a moment longer. That heavy, searching look she was beginning to recognize, the one that felt less like scrutiny and more like a man confirming something he already knew. "Sleep," he said. "You're safe here." He left. The door clicked softly behind him. She didn't trust it. She didn't know how to trust it, but when she finally lay down on the widest, softest surface she had ever been given, she slept without waiting for something bad to happen in the dark. For the first time in 11 years, she reached for the coffee pot at the exact same moment he did. And that was when she saw it, the scar. And her entire world cracked open at the seam. She had been in the estate for 3 days and a fragile routine had begun to form. Breakfast in the kitchen where the chef, a quiet older man named Mr. Beck, always set a place for her without being asked. Long hours studying in a room Ji-yeon had outfitted with a proper desk and a lamp at exactly the right height. Brief encounters with Ye-jun, who moved through the spaces she occupied like weather, present, affecting, and then gone. He was not what the rumors said. He was not what anything said. On Wednesday morning, they both reached for the coffee pot at the same time. The cuff of his sleeve drew back. And there it was, on the back of his right hand, between the knuckle of his index finger and the edge of his thumb. Small, faint, crescent-shaped. She froze. He noticed, set the coffee pot down, said nothing, just watched her. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "A long time ago," he said. Her heart was doing something it had no logical reason to do. She reached out, slowly, without fully deciding to, and touched the edge of the scar with her fingertip. She felt him go completely still beneath her touch. Not tense. Still. The way you go still when something you've been waiting for has finally arrived, and you are terrified of startling it away. "The playground," she said. It came out like something she hadn't meant to say aloud. He did not answer. He watched her. The memory arrived the way old memories do, not in sequence, but in textures. The smell of autumn, cold concrete, the rattle of a chain-link fence in October wind. She had been 9 years old, not yet placed with Mrs. Gable, still at the group home, using the park on the corner after school because the park was better than going back before dinner. There had been older boys, and a smaller boy, 7, maybe 8, slight and quiet, with dark eyes that didn't look afraid even when they probably should have. He'd said something to the older boys in another language when they cornered him, and they'd taken it as disrespect, and one of them had grabbed his hand and shoved it into the chain-link fence hard enough to split the skin at the knuckle. She had crossed the park with her backpack still on her back and told the older boys in her clearest 9-year-old voice that she would scream loud enough for the entire block to hear unless they left. They left. People always underestimated 9-year-old girls who had already learned that the world was not going to protect them. She'd torn a strip from the hem of her t-shirt and wrapped the small boy's hand while he watched her with those dark, serious eyes. He had said, in careful and accented English, "What is your name?" She had said, "Henrietta, but people call me Etta." He had said, "I am June, people call me Junie." She had patted the top of his bandaged hand once, twice, the way her mother had done when she was very small, and it was still possible to imagine things would be fine. 2 weeks later, she'd gone back to the park. He was gone. The family he was visiting had returned to Korea. He had simply ceased to exist in her world, the way people did when you were 9, and the world was very large and very indifferent. She looked up from the scar on his hand. Ye-jun was looking at her with an expression she did not yet have a name for. Something layered and old, kept in a closed room for a very long time, standing now at an open door and blinking in the light. "Junie," she said. Barely sound at all. "Etta," he said. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the city moved on, entirely unconcerned. "You knew," she said finally. "You knew it was me." "From the moment they told me your name," he said. "How long have you known where I was?" 3 months, he said. "It took 2 years to find you. 3 months to make certain you would be safe when I reached you." She thought about the gambling debt, the casino, the briefcase, the signed paper. "You set it up," she said. "The debt. Mrs. Gable's debt. You engineered the whole thing." He said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Here's what Mrs. Gable never understood about men like Kwan Ye, June. He didn't chase people. He built the circumstances that brought them to him. He had let her run up that debt across 8 months at his casino, table by table, night by night, not because he needed the money, because he needed the leverage that money creates. He needed the law on his side. Because the alternative, taking Henrietta by force, was something he had refused to do, even though he could have done it at any moment. He was the most powerful man in the Seoul underworld. And he had chosen to wait, and plan, and be legal about it, because she deserved to be freed, not seized. The tears came without warning. She was not a crier. She had trained it out of herself thoroughly and early. But these were the kind that don't ask permission. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer or pull away. He simply reached across the counter and placed his hand, palm up, between them. An offer, not a demand. She pressed her hand into his. His fingers closed gently around hers. They stayed like that while the city moved outside the glass and the coffee went cold, and Henrietta cried, not for grief, she would understand later, but for the strange, disorienting weight of being found. He called her into his study that evening, dark shelves of legal volumes, a wide desk with nothing unnecessary on it, a fireplace burning low and orange against the far wall. On the desk between them lay a document she recognized immediately, not the paper itself, but the shape of it, the legal columns, the signature block, the stamp of something official and final. She had seen variations of it her entire life, in the group home, in the foster intake office, in Mrs. Gable's kitchen. She crossed the room and read it. Transfer of custodial obligation and financial claim. Her name in boxes. Her presence valued at $50,000 and the cancellation of a casino debt. Clean. Clinical. Obscene. I wanted you to see it, Yejun said. I didn't want you to spend years wondering what was in it. He reached into the drawer and produced a second document. A legal addendum, his signature already on it, one line highlighted at the bottom. All claims, obligations, and terms of the original agreement are hereby dissolved and rendered void. For any future moment when someone tries to tell you that you were ever owned or owed, he said. Then he picked up the original, the one with her name in the boxes, Mrs. Gable's scratch at the bottom, and walked to the fireplace. He dropped it in. The paper caught immediately. The legal typeface blackened. The numbered clauses broke apart. She watched every line of it dissolve into orange and then into nothing. You are owned by no one, he said. His voice was even and quiet and absolute, the voice of a man making something a permanent, irrevocable fact. Not by Mrs. Gable, not by the system, not by me. He turned to look at her. Never by me. Do you understand? She understood. She understood that the boy who had let a 9-year-old girl tie a strip of torn fabric around his bleeding hand had grown into a man who crossed an ocean and built an empire and spent 2 years searching, and done all of it not to possess her, but to ensure no one else ever could. She pressed her fingers around the bracelet at her wrist, pink and yellow beads, elastic gone slack with age. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not feel like she was disappearing. The fire burned low, the ash settled, and somewhere in the city below, Mrs. Gable was counting $50,000 and believing the transaction was complete. She had no idea that all she had done was light the match. Everyone assumed he bought her to cage her. Nobody considered that a man who spent 2 years finding someone might have also spent 2 years preparing for what she needed when he did. She found him in the study after dinner, reading something on his laptop with a focused stillness she had come to recognize as his resting state. I need to go back, she said from the doorway. To school. I have clinicals and a practical exam next week, and I've already missed. You haven't missed anything, he said. He finished the line he was reading, then closed the laptop. Your professors have been notified of a personal emergency. Your absences are excused. Your exam has been rescheduled. She stared at him. I also pay the remaining balance on your tuition, he said. The full amount, including the outstanding fee from last spring that financial aid was holding against your registration. Yejun. And the hospital wing? He said. She stopped. Grayson Memorial, he continued, his voice as even as if he were discussing the weather. The East Wing was weeks from closing due to a funding crisis. That is the floor where your cohort trains. I purchased the naming rights and funded the renovation. It will reopen as the Kwan East Wing. He paused. Your cohort will have access to it for the remainder of the program, and every cohort after that. The silence in the study was very full. You bought a hospital wing, she said. A partial wing. Because my clinical placement was at risk. Because it was a problem I could solve, he said simply. So I solved it. She stood in the doorway holding this information the way you hold something unexpectedly heavy, not sure whether to set it down or keep carrying it. She had spent 11 years in a house where her problems were either ignored or weaponized. She had learned to shrink every need down to nothing, to never ask, to treat every small want like a liability she couldn't afford. She didn't know what to do with a man who looked at her problems and reached for his phone. I was going to pay you back. The tuition. I was going to... You were going to become a nurse, he said. That's all I want from the tuition. He opened his laptop again. A quiet signal that the matter was closed. Your driver will take you to class on Monday. Jian has your schedule. She went back to her room and sat on the edge of the bed and held the elastic bracelet between her fingers. and she thought about the girl who had been 11 years old the first time she was told she was lucky anyone had taken her in at all. She was beginning to understand, slowly and with great difficulty, that she had been lied to. She thought the worst was behind her. She thought she was finally safe. She was winning this new life, until she realized Mrs. Gable had been playing a different game the entire time and had just made her move. They were in the kitchen. June reviewing a contract at the counter, Henrietta making notes in the margin of her pharmacology textbook, when his phone buzzed against the marble. He glanced at the screen. Something shifted in his expression, brief and controlled. He answered, listened, then held the phone out to her without a word. She took it. Hello? Well? Mrs. Gable's voice was warm, in the way cold things pretend to be warm when they want something. Don't you sound comfortable? Henrietta's hand tightened on the phone. I've been watching the news, Mrs. Gable continued. Funny thing, seeing your face on television. All dressed up outside some charity event? Standing next to him? A loaded pause. I have to say, Henrietta, I didn't think you had it in you. What do you want, Mrs. Gable? The warmth dropped entirely. $5 million, wired to my account by Friday. Because what I have is a very interesting story about a man who paid cash for a girl and drove her away in a car with no witnesses. I have lawyers who use words like trafficking and coercion and criminal enterprise. Another pause. I imagine a man like June would prefer I didn't share that story with anyone. The kitchen went very quiet. I took care of you for 11 years, Mrs. Gable added. Consider it. Back pay. Henrietta looked at June. He was watching her with his hands flat on the counter, expression unreadable. I'll tell him, Henrietta said. You do that, sweetheart. The warmth was back, slick and satisfied. Friday. The call ended. She set the phone on the counter. 3 seconds of silence. Then June picked the phone up, looked at the screen once, and closed his hand around it. The case cracked first. Then something inside gave way with a sound like a small bone. He set the pieces on the counter in a neat arrangement. The way you set down something you are finished with. She has lawyers, Henrietta said carefully. She has a public defender and a gambling problem, he said. Those are not the same thing. June. She set down her pencil. Don't kill them. He looked at her. I know what you're thinking. I can see you thinking it. And I'm asking you, don't. Not for her sake. She doesn't deserve your mercy, and I'm not asking you to give her any. She held his eyes. I'm asking because I don't want blood on the end of this story. I want to walk away clean. He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. I won't kill them, he said finally. She exhaled. I'll destroy them, he said. Plain, factual. The way you state something that is simply true. He picked up his tablet and walked toward the corridor. At the doorway he paused, back still to her. Finish your breakfast. We leave at 9 on Monday. Where are we going? He glanced back over his shoulder, and for just a moment, just one, something crossed his face that was almost satisfaction. Home, he said, to yours. For the last time. Mrs. Gable's strategy. Dress well, bring a lawyer, project confidence, demand money. June's strategy. Buy the building before she woke up. There is no competition between someone who plays the game and someone who owns the board. She had imagined this moment sometimes, some version of leaving on her own terms. Some version where she was the one who walked out instead of being told to disappear. She had never imagined it like this. 5 vehicles, black SUVs, moving in formation, unhurried. The limousine at the center. The same one that had carried her away from this street in the rain 10 days ago. They turned onto the block at 9:14. Through the tinted window, Henrietta watched the house appear. In the daylight, it looked smaller than it lived in her memory. The paint more faded, the front step more cracked, the yard thinner and grayer. She had spent 11 years making that house function, and it had spent 11 years pretending she didn't exist. Seeing it reduced to its actual dimensions felt like something finally correcting itself. Yejun's hand found hers somewhere on the highway and had stayed there. She had not moved it. The convoy stopped. Mrs. Gable was already at the door. She had dressed for this, the silk blouse she saved for important occasions. Hair set. A lawyer beside her. Youngish, uncertain-looking, suit that didn't fit quite right. Phone in hand. Chin at an angle that said, "I have leverage." She watched the 5 vehicles with barely concealed satisfaction. 5 vehicles meant money, meant negotiation, meant she had won. The limousine door opened. Yejun stepped out. All black. Moving across the cracked front walkway with the unhurried certainty of someone who had decided how this ended before he got in the car. He did not look at Mrs. Gable or the lawyer. He reached back and offered Henrietta his hand as she stepped out. She took it. They walked to the door together. Mrs. Gable's chin came down slightly. "Mr. Kwan," she said, recovering. "I appreciate you coming in person. That tells me we're both serious people who can—" Yejun reached into his jacket and produced a document. He held it out. Did not speak. Mrs. Gable took it with the expression of someone who expected a check and received a page of legal text. Her lawyer leaned in. 15 seconds of silence. Then Mrs. Gable looked up. The silk blouse composure had gone somewhere else entirely. "This is a property deed," she said. "Yes," said Yejun. "This is a deed to my house." "It was your house," Yejun said. "The mortgage on this property has been in default for 7 months. The bank moved to seize it 14 days ago. I purchased the note from the bank on Friday at 4 p.m. A pause. "You have been a tenant since then, an unauthorized one, as of this morning." Mrs. Gable's lawyer was pulling at her sleeve with increasing urgency. "I have rights," she said. "I have 11 years of documented care for that girl." "You have a receipt," Yejun said quietly, "for $50,000. That is the documentation you signed. That is the only thing you have." Behind the convoy, a moving truck turned onto the block. Henrietta had not planned to speak. She had rehearsed a version of this where she said, "Nothing," where she witnessed in silence, let Yejun's machinery do what it was built to do, and stood beside it, free and quiet. She had thought that would be enough. She hadn't accounted for the look on Mrs. Gable's face, not the shock, not the anger, not the pale, dawning terror as the movers came up the walkway with clipboards and dollies and began removing 11 years of accumulated furniture through the front door. She had seen all those expressions before, in different shapes, aimed at her. She was not moved by any of them. It was the moment Mrs. Gable searched Henrietta's face, searched for the girl who always looked down, who always absorbed, who always made herself smaller, and found instead a woman looking back. That was when Henrietta spoke. "I cleaned your floors for 11 years, she said. Her voice was even. She had not raised it. She did not need to. "I cooked your meals and I stayed out of every room you decided I wasn't welcome in. I woke up early and went to bed last, and I was grateful, the way you kept telling me I needed to be, every single day." She paused. "I was 22 years old and you sold me. You wrote your name on a piece of paper and you sold me for less than a car." Mrs. Gable opened her mouth. "I don't need anything from you," Henrietta said. "Not an apology, not an explanation. I don't need you to feel bad about it." She looked at the woman. Really looked, the way she had never been able to afford to before, and what she felt was not hatred, not grief, not the hot pressure of 11 years finally exhaling. What she felt was distance, clean, final, permanent. "I just wanted you to see me," she said, "standing here, one time, before I go." A mover came through the door with a television, another with dining chairs. Mrs. Gable watched them pass with an expression that had stopped being angry and gone hollow. The lawyer had stopped trying to intervene and was reading documents on his phone with the focused misery of someone confirming they have no options. Henrietta turned and walked back down the front path. She did not run. She did not look over her shoulder. She walked the same cracked walkway she had walked for 11 years, shoveled in winter, swept in summer, crossed every day of her adolescence in quiet invisibility. And she walked it like it was already behind her. Because it was. Yejun fell into step beside her. At the car, he opened the door and she got in, and he came in after her. And the door sealed with that same soft, pressurized click she remembered from the first night. The sound of a world closing. Outside, she could hear Mrs. Gable's voice rising, sharp and ragged, as the movers brought out the couch. She heard Bryce say something. She heard the lawyer's measured, apologetic tones, the ordinary sounds of consequence arriving. Unhurried and thorough, the way it always does when it finally comes. She did not roll down the window. She did not look back. She pressed her hand against the bracelet at her wrist. The elastic and the pink beads and the yellow ones, the only thing she had carried out of her whole life before this one. And she breathed in the cedar and winter spice scent of the limousine, and she looked straight ahead at the road going somewhere else. Yejun's hand found hers on the seat between them. "Okay," he said quietly. She thought about the nursing exam on Wednesday, about Mr. Beck setting her place at the counter without being asked, about a boy with serious dark eyes on a cold playground who had said her name carefully, like he was learning something worth keeping. She thought about the woman she was walking toward, who did not clean other people's floors, who did not apologize for existing in a room, who already knew, without being told, that she deserved to be protected. "Yes," she said. The convoy moved. The Foster house. Its cracked step. Its faded paint. Its 11 years of silences shrank in the rearview mirror and disappeared around a corner. And the city opened up ahead of them, wide and indifferent and full of everything that had not happened yet. Henrietta kept her eyes on it. She didn't look back once. What happens when Yejun's rivals discover his one vulnerability? And what does a woman raised to believe she was worth nothing do when the entire underworld decides she's a target? Henrietta thinks the danger is over because she left Mrs. Gable behind. She doesn't know that by stepping into Yejun's car, she just put a target on her back for every rival crime family in Seoul. The Golden Dragon Syndicate has been looking for Yejun's weakness for 5 years, and they just found her. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because in part 2, the real war begins, and Yejun will have to burn down half the city to keep her safe.